In this video, we are going to take a look at lab 27.10. It's called Count Characters. And the premise of this lab will be to input a character and a text string. And the idea is we want to count the number of times that particular character appears in the text string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the high-level steps that I would take to break down this larger problem into smaller steps that we can then build right into code. So it's kind of a way of analyzing the problem and thinking it out before you just jumping right into writing lines of code. So I'm doing this directly in the Xylab's book, and you can see it has a description to write a program whose input is a character and a character string. So that should be the first thing I start to think about, is what do I need to collect this kind of input? Well, I know I need a scanner, and I know I need two variables, a character variable and a string variable. So before I write any code, I'm going to, at least in the body of the lab program, is start putting in some comments, and then I'll write the code after the comments. So the first thing I'll do is create a scanner. Second thing I'm going to include is declare and initialize variables. Now you could argue that the scanner and the variables could be the same step, but it's always good to break it down into the smallest possible steps you can, so you can write simpler lines of code in an easier way. And it'll also help out when we do our testing, that if we have smaller pieces of code to test at one time, it'll be easier to go through and a little bit faster when we get to the debugging portion. So that's the first step. The second part is an output whose number of times the character appears in the string. So that is telling me we're going to need a loop to look at every position in the string, and we are going to need an if statement to check for the character. The last piece says the output should include the input character and use of plural form n'(s) to display the number of times a character appears if it's not exactly one. And then they give us some examples to tell us what that means. So if the character appears one time, you're going to say character appears one time. If you say the character appears 5 times, you want the plural form. You don't want the singular form. So we're going to make it look and sound proper as well. So we'll scroll down to the bottom, and we will add some more steps. So we have our variables declared. We are going to need to collect the input character and string. I don't know why I did that, but okay, let's get rid of that. Oh, I know, it was the autocomplete from the IDE. We don't want that. We just want the comments for now. Okay. We want to create a loop to look at every position. Well, let's go with every character in the string. And then you see how I'm indenting because I know it's a loop. I want to do this next pieces of code inside the loop. So now I can actually structure it so I know I have to build a loop. Let's build some statements in the loop. Check for character match and increase counter if there is a match. So there's our counter to do the matching. Once the loop is done, we'll have our count, and we want to then just print the output in the appropriate format. So I think that at a very high level, that is what we will need to do. So now you could see, instead of just typing from the very beginning of this, the requirements in the lab, we now have a sequence of steps which it's much easier to write code from. We know how to create a scanner. We know how to declare and initialize variables. We know how to get input from the scanner. And we could actually even elaborate from the scanner. And then we could do the loop, and we could do the if statement, and then we could do the print. And the print might need another if statement too, and we'll see that when we get to it. So let's start building. Well, we already have the import statement. So the first thing we can do is we can create a scanner. SCNR equals new scanner system in. Okay, we have our scanner now. Let's create some variables. So we know we're going to need an input character equals, and we'll give it a, oops, not a double quote, a single quote. We'll initialize it. And we'll need a string, and we'll do the same thing. We'll initialize it to blank values. So what else do we need? What other variables do you think we'll need? Well, we know we need to count the number of characters that either is a match or not a match. So we will need to create an integer variable, character match count equals 0. So now we have our match count, and we are going to probably need a temporary variable to hold the character that we want to check at that time. So let's create one more character, temp car equals also blanks. Now I say a temporary character, and that's just a placeholder for something we might need during our coding. We can define it now and use it or not, and we'll see how we go when we start doing the collecting of input and the scanning of characters. Okay, so we are now ready to build our input. So let us write some code underneath the comment where we're going to collect the input. And we know we are going to need to get input character equals scanner dot next dot char at 0. So we know that is the line of code that we use to get a single character from the input, as we've seen in various chapters and various other examples. The next is the input string. Input string is equal to, again, scanner, and this time we don't want to use the next character or the next. We want to read to the end of the line. We want to read the entire text string after that first character's input. And so we are going to do next line. Now, when you're asking for input, it's always a good idea to put a little piece of text in there so the user can realize what they have to input. System.out.println. Please enter a single character and a text string to check. So a little direction is always a good thing to have. Now keep in mind that we may run into problems with the auto grader in Zybooks when we put these extra strings in. If so, we'll have to take it out later, but let's see what happens as we do our coding. And as a part of testing, what I like to do is print out the input after we gather it to make sure we did gather it correctly. Because if we didn't gather our input correctly, everything else we do after this point makes no sense and will not work right. So simple print statements are just fine for testing. We'll do a print line of input character, and we don't even need any text around it. We can just put the variables just so we can see what's in it, because this is just for us for testing and debugging. So we have no real logic yet. We haven't written that. We have variable definitions and we have some input. So let's give it a quick little run. I want to give us a little more room down here. And we'll run it, and it says As soon as it starts up, please enter a single character, and we'll stick with A, and we'll put in this is a test. And when I hit return, now I don't want to hit return yet. I want to think about what I expect to see as my output to make sure it makes sense. I expect to see the letter A print, and then I expect to see this is a test print next. And it did. Now notice there's this leading space here. That's because when we read the line of input, we read the first character, and the cursor stopped at the end of the A, and then we read the rest of the line. Now for this particular example, it doesn't matter because we're just counting characters. But you may run into that issue in other labs and other problems that you're trying to solve, that you may not want that leading space. So if you do, you'll just have to trim it off and get rid of it. And there are methods for that. So just keep that in mind, and this is why you do your printing after you read your input, to make sure you have what you need. So now that we know that, we can comment out these lines because we no longer need them. And we'll get ready to write our loop. So the first part we want to write is the loop statement. Now you can use a for loop because we know the length of the string. You could use a while loop because you could use a while loop for just about everything. I'm going to go with a while loop, and maybe afterwards we'll convert it to a for loop. So first, let's start with the while loop. So first thing we're going to need is while. And while something is less than something else is usually the syntax here. We are going to need to know two things. We need to know the input string's length and how many characters we're looking at. So we don't know what character position we're looking at yet because we don't have a variable for that. So we'll have to go back up and create another variable. So we'll have to have an integer. We'll call it character position. And we'll put that to 0 as well. So while, now we come back to our while loop, and we can call it while the character position, currently 0, is less than the string's length. So we need the string's length. So either we can create another variable and store it in a variable, the string's length, or we can just call the method directly. I'm going to call the method directly. I think that'll be just fine, which is the input string length. So now we have our loop defined, and this will go through each position of the loop. One thing to remember is we need, at the end of the loop now, to increase character by 1 every time. Otherwise, we'll be stuck in an infinite loop. That's the benefit of using a for loop, is you don't need to worry about that. So maybe we'll switch it over in a little bit and see if we can make it work with both a while loop and a for loop. So I'm going to take my comment because my comment got lost. So let's put the comment back in here. And we'll line it up so it makes a little more sense. So now that we have our loop, we need to look at the character in the string and compare it to our input test character, which was in the variable input char. So we want to take a look at input char and compare that to the character at a position. So we need an if statement, and we can say if the input character is equal to a character at a position, and notice we need double equals here, we need to identify the character at that position. So we need to do the input string, because that's our input string, and the character at a position, well, that's just char at again. Now, the question is, what do we put in here? Well, we need to look at whatever position we're looking at. So we want to look at character position. So that character position is the loop iterating variable that will allow us to look at every position in the string. So that's important that we make sure we get the right variables in there. Otherwise, we'll just loop through randomly looking at different things and we're not necessarily going to get the right values. So now that we have our comparison built, if it is a match, well, if it is a match, then we just want to increase our counter. And what did we call it? We called it character match count. So character match count plus plus. Increase our character match count. After we do our comparison, we'll come in, increase the loop counter, and we'll complete the loop. So let's just review that entire loop one last time, because that was a little bit of code in there. We have a while loop, and we will execute the while loop while the variable counter position is less than the length of the string. While we're in the while loop, we are comparing the input character to the character at the position in the string that we're looking at. If it is a match, we increase this counter. Regardless if it's a match or not, we increase character position so we can progress down the string to eventually get to the end. And then we end our loop. So once we get to the end of the loop, we should have some value. And we are going to test that now by printing out character match count. And we'll test that with some known variables. So we'll do some simple tests. And we'll enter a letter. And again, we'll put in just a simple piece of text, alpha. There are two A's in alpha. I would expect it to print 2. And it did. Run it again. Let's try a different letter. B in alpha. I would expect it to print 0. And it did. Try it again. P in alpha. It printed 1, which is correct. So it looks like it's counting properly. So now that we've got the counting proper, we can attempt to format the output. We'll comment out this temp line temporarily to the way they want it to look. And now we have to go back up to the requirements. So in order for the auto grading in the labs to work, as you've all probably seen by now, the output must match exactly. So we want the output to be either 1 and the letter, or 0 and the letters apostrophe S, or, well, anything not 1, that's the letter apostrophe S. So a couple ways we could do this. Well, first we'll need our if statement. If, now what do we want to build the if on? It seems that based on the lab requirements, the apostrophe S is different when you have 1 character in the count or anything else. So I would recommend, since we know it's easy to differentiate between 1 and everything else, we can do character match count equals 1. If it is equal to 1, we can system.out.println. And they want us to print the character match count plus a space plus the input character. Right? Does that make sense? Count space character. Let's scroll up and look. Count space character. Okay. And for the other cases, we want the apostrophe S. So we can build our else. And we'll save a little time and copy and paste here. And now we need to add in the apostrophe S. Now, you could certainly create other if statements and other types of printing to accomplish the same results. But first, before we even look at that, let's just continue and test this out. And we'll stick with the alpha test because that seemed to work well. And we will run. And we will type in A, alpha, 2 A's. Oh, good. That looks right. And we'll run it again. Trying to line it up. There it goes. And we'll do P alpha. Should be 1P with no apostrophe. And there's no apostrophe. Excellent. And our last test will be X alpha. Should be 0 X's. Great. Now we could always even type longer examples. We can type E and we can type an entire sentence. Quick brown fox jumps over the lazy sleeping dog. Let's see how many E's we get. There are 4 E's. And let's see, and we'll double check and we'll count real quick and see what we find. There's 1. There's 2. There's 3. Did I miss one? The quick brown fox jumps over 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, there are 4. Okay, I did miss one. So if we ran this to the auto grader, and I run for submit for grading, I'm not going to expect full credit at this point because of the extra printing I have. But let's see what it gives us. And we'll see what it's complaining about so we can fix our output. I got a 0 out of 10, even though I know the output is right. You could see it's complaining that there's this extra text string, extra text. So you could look at all your outputs and you could see it's all the same thing. And we can easily fix that by going in and commenting out our prompt. And if we ran it again for grading, I would hope to get 10 out of 10 this time. And there we go. Excellent. So this was more of an exercise of how I would break it down and solve the problem versus how I'd write the code. The writing of the code sometimes is the easy part. It's the steps you need to get to the writing of the code, which could be a challenge. Now, I had said there's some other ways we could do this. Let's convert the while loop to a for loop. And I will comment this out to save it so we don't have to delete it all, because it is good code. We might want to keep it. So let's build our for loop instead. For. Well, what did we want to loop with? Well, we saw in our examples where we use I for the iterator. We don't have to use I. We certainly can use that character position. That's a great starting point. We have a variable built up for it already, so let's use it. Character position equals 0. And then it's character position less than input string dot length. That hasn't changed. And then we need character position plus plus. So we have now all the stuff we need to do our loop right in there. We don't need this extra character position manual update at the end. So I'm going to copy this line of code and copy it, if it'll let me, so I could paste it back in when we run our test. Let's run our test, and I made a typo somewhere. Okay, let's find that typo. Illegal start of expression on line 37, and I forgot the curly bracket over here. Let's put that in. And we'll run it again. And it's taking a little while to run this time. Oh, it is running because we took the input out, so we don't know what's waiting for input. See, that's why you always want that input string. So let's put in E and the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy sleeping dog. 5 E's. That's interesting. Why are we getting 5 this time versus 4? We should have 4. So we'll have to take a look at that and understand why. Actually, 5 is correct. The quick brown fox jumps over 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 is correct and 4 was incorrect prior. So now that we have the for loop working, let's go back and look at the while loop and find out why that was incorrect. Now I'm concerned about that we missed something. So I can simply comment out and uncomment as necessary. And I'm using extra slashes just so it's easier for us to see. So we're back to our original, and we're going to run it again with the same input. Quick brown fox jumps over the lazy sleeping dog. Again, we should have 5 now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. So I'm going to pause this for a minute and look at the video and see what I did wrong the first time to see if I really did have 4 or 5 E's in there. Oh wait, it'll be down in the output below. No, it is not, because it is not. Okay, so let me pause the video here for a second. I'll be right back, and we'll see what happened in the prior input. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, so what the issue was prior was instead of me typing the quick brown fox, I had typed this quick brown fox. So it truly was 4 E's. So we were right all along. Everything was great. I just failed to provide the proper input. So another reason why you need to check your input and your output to make sure what you're putting in is what you're expecting. So we have a for loop, we have a while loop. Either one worked, which is great. The other thing we could do is potentially change the if statement to print something in a different order. I think this is sufficient. What we could have done different, and maybe I'll comment these out with the 4 slashes again, and I'll show you a different way, is if the input is, actually I'll have to comment out this whole block, so let me do that instead. Another way would be to print the first part of the line and then print out the rest of it, meaning I can do system.out.println, and regardless of which way we go, we're going to need this statement. I'll just paste the whole thing here. So regardless of which way we print, we're either going to print a count, a space, and a letter. It's just the apostrophe S that we need extra. And in this case, we'll take away the print. ln will make it print. Now print ln prints an entire line. Print just prints what you're telling it to print and leaves the cursor at where it ends off at the end of the line. So you can add more stuff to it with more print statements. So after this, we'll just need a simple if statement. If character match count is not equal to 1, we can print the apostrophe S. And then after the whole thing is done, we can just do a system.1.out.println to end the line. So this would be a second method that we could try. I'll put some comments into this and a comment down here for that. So we have an alternate way of doing that. Let's give it a run and see how it looks, pending any typos I made. And we'll do a smaller piece of text this time. We'll do A. Today is Saturday. 3 A's. That looks right. How many Y's? We have 2 Y's, so that's not a good one. Looks like O. We can do O. We'll run it again with O for today is Saturday. Or Z or some other letter. X. Use X. Today is Saturday. 0 X's. Now let's pick one with exactly 1. It looks like I would be a good choice for that. I. Today is Saturday. 1I. Great. So the output looks right that way as well. We'll confirm. We'll do a quick submit for grading and make sure we still have 10 out of 10. And we do. So great. So we have, we saw in this little demo, we have 2 ways of doing the loops, and we have 2 ways of doing the output. There are probably more for either way that do that. These are the ways I would do it. It seems to be the simplest and most straightforward. Feel free to investigate and try different things on your own. And that's it. I will post this video and the sample code into Brightspace and YouTube respectively. That's it. Have a great day. Talk to you next time.